The change is already happening, gang. We are in the middle of a global shift. Now, I break it all down in my most important book yet, America Awaken. Go to americaawaken.us and get early access now. We got some breaking news here. Mark Mitchell of Rasmussen, one of the single most accurate pollsters of 2024, is reporting that Trump's polls are absolutely surging in the aftermath of these LA riots and his deployment of the National Guard. Trump has hit an astonishing 56% national approval. 56%. That's man levels. That's mansplaining levels, right? That's the level of support Trump routinely gets from male voters. Now it is the nation as a whole. In fact, Mark's last 4 overnight polls, Rasmussen does a weekly rolling average. The last 4 nights have seen Trump at 53% approval, 54%, 50%, and now standing at 56%. Absolutely insane. Now, of course, this comes on the heels of the polls we reported on in our last video. One of the best pollsters out there, Insider Advantage, they found that 59% of voters support President Trump's deployment of National Guard troops. 6 in 10. Only 39% disapprove. So that's a 20-point margin in Trump's favor. And RMG, another very accurate pollster from 2024, they found that 58%, almost identical to Insider Advantage, 58% support the Trump administration's efforts to deport illegal migrants. Only 37% disapprove. Again, a 21-point margin in Trump's favor. But it gets even better. Right track numbers are up. This is coming from Mark Mitchell, again, of Rasmussen. Right track numbers are up. Now, Mark is teasing us. He has yet to release them, but he's saying that they are up from the numbers that he gave just a week ago when, for the first time in Rasmussen's polling history, a majority of Americans believed the nation was on the right track. It hit 50% after 2 decades of being in the negative double digits. And this surge in optimism for the country on the right track is being propelled by young voters. Voters under the age of 30, according to Rasmussen's data, are very, very optimistic about where things are going. So if that's the case, Mark is putting on his detective cap and asking a very interesting question here, rather pointing out the obvious. It is highly abnormal to have widespread riots across the country when youth right direction polling is setting records. In other words, these riots are astroturf. They're artificial. They're not real. Of course, you're not going to hear this from the legacy media. Of course not. The Biden is perfectly fit media. But these riots are being fueled by far left special interest groups like most particularly the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights and the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the PSL. That according to the New York Post. But unfortunately for them, all of their astroturfed left-wing activism is to no avail. Jesse Waters said this. I thought it was brilliant. You'll notice these riots are getting no cultural traction whatsoever. None. Zippo. No cultural traction whatsoever. You'll notice no one is posting Mexican flags on their Facebook or Instagram posts, Instagram accounts. No one is claiming solidarity with Mexico. No one's taking a knee wearing a sombrero. That's what Jesse said. I thought that was hilarious. No companies are catering to La Raza the way they catered to BLM back in 2020, sending them tens of millions of dollars. There is literally zero cultural traction in any of this. And again, to make it even worse, remember, what are the 2 most predictive indicators for the midterms? If you've been with this channel for a while, and if not, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. But if you've been with us for a while, then you will know the answer to this. What are the two most predictive indicators for how the midterms are going to turn out? Presidential approval rating and right track, wrong track. Presidential approval rating and right track, wrong track. And Trump is absolutely crushing it in both. The numbers, frankly, are just spiraling out of control for the Democrats. These riots, these astroturf riots, are turning out to be the single biggest gift they could possibly give to Trump and the Republicans. And there are already some rather astute Democrats who are starting to seriously worry out loud.
The next things Republicans are going to say is, they're for lawlessness, right? They're going to show these images. They're going to say they're for lawlessness. Folks are going to buy it hook, line, and sinker. And their issues of safety is going to usurp any other concerns they have. I'm talking about the voters. And before you know it, Dems are going to lose the midterm. They're not going to regain any seats in the House or the Senate. And Trump will be able to operate with relative impunity to 2028.
Gang, it's more important than ever for all of us to reclaim our privacy, and you have no better way of protecting yourself than with SLNT. That's short for silent. Silent's Faraday products block all incoming and outgoing signals, so no one can get their hands on your information. From key FOBs to phones and laptops, simply place your device inside, close the sleeve, and voila, that's it. You're off the grid and safeguarded from unauthorized access. Go silent today by clicking on that link below or going to slnt.com/Turley to save 15% off plus free shipping on all qualified orders. Stay ahead of what's coming and secure your privacy today. Again, that's slnt.com/Turley for 15% off and free shipping on all qualified orders. slnt.com/Turley. Now, Mark Mitchell is further noting a very interesting and very relevant indicator in all of this, and that's the fact that California has moved 10 points to the right since the last time LA rioted back in 2020. As gruesome Newsom tries to position himself as the Democrat nominee for 2028, doesn't matter, he's going to get slaughtered by JD, but regardless, he's doing so against the rather inconvenient truth that California, under his tenure, is turning more and more red. Trump won over 40% of the vote in 2024 in California. That's a 10-point increase from 2020. And he flipped a number of counties. He flipped San Bernardino. He flipped Orange County. He flipped Fresno. Literally a half dozen counties that were all blue in 2020. They're now red. Not a single county in California flipped the other way from red to blue. Not one. And we've talked about this before. We actually predicted this rightward shift among particularly blue states, states where rioting is just an ongoing recurrence. But a relatively recent study from Princeton found that riots turn populations to the right. Yeah, I know. Seems odd that we even need a study to corroborate this, but we'll take it where we get it, that's for sure. But in a nutshell, we now have a study that confirms riots red pill. The New Yorker published a study which found that riots consistently result in a clear trend among voters turning to the political right as a response to the violence. Surprise, surprise, I know. But this Princeton scholar examined riots, particularly race-related riots, going all the way back to the 1960s. And he found that counties that were closest to the location of the riots, counties that were in closest proximity to the location of the riots, every one of them experienced significant and consistent declines in Democrat vote shares. He saw it in 64 presidential election. He saw it in the 68 presidential election. He saw it in the 72 presidential election. All elections that were within, as it were, earshot of major riots. And the study went on to note as well that the physical damage inflicted upon poor urban neighborhoods by rioting does not at any point result in more liberal or progressive policies, particularly at the national level. But rather, the violence only compounds the damage by instigating what this professor calls a regressive backlash against the riots. A regressive backlash, meaning voters turn to the right. So obviously this Princeton professor is clearly a left-wing liberal with choice expressions like that. But that duly noted, I think it's important to recognize that the notion that riots red pill is not right-wing wishful thinking. These are the conclusions of left-wing liberals, both the professor and the New Yorker magazine. They're both admitting that the violent riots of the 1960s did, in fact, usher in a Nixonian era of law and order that drove a wave of anti-rioter legislation that lasted for decades, even causing liberal politicians like Bill Clinton to endorse criminal justice penalties that were considered radically harsh but were necessary for a president to get reelected, in his case in 96. So it's no coincidence that California has moved 10 points, gang, 10 points to the right since their last riots 5 years ago. That's the pattern that we've been seeing since the 1960s, since riots started becoming a regular thing among the lunatic left. Bottom line, riots red pill. The left may not like to hear this, but riots turn voters to the right. And with this latest polling from Rasmussen, it looks like we are seeing precisely that rightward turn in real time.